Everybody, my name is Michelle Jackson. I am here. I'm not Erin Thomas. That may be the name that you see. I am Michelle Jackson. I am the PR consultant for Delgado Workforce IT. I am here for our Tech Talk Thursday. Really excited to have this event take place. We have a dynamic presenter today, Blair Dottin-Haley, who's going to talk to us about podcasting. So if you're interested in learning about podcasting, this is definitely the place to be. So I am Michelle Jackson. Once again, I'm just here to host. If you have any questions, you can put those in the chat box, and we'll be sure to get to those throughout the day. We're only going to be here for an hour. We will spend time at the very end answering questions, but if we can get your questions answered during his presentation, we will definitely do that. So as I said, we're going to get started. We have Blair Dottin-Haley. He is a New Orleans native. He's a veteran vocal performer and co-founder of Blairism's lifestyle brand. Blair and his husband, Brandon, have been noted as brand activists because of their use of the Blairism brand as a vehicle for promoting progressive causes and raising awareness and social justice initiatives. As brand activists, the Blairisms use apparel to speak truth to power, celebrate Blackness and queer identities, and shine a light on the breadth and range of Black culture. We are so excited to have him here today. In 2020, the Blairism used its platform to create a virtual space called the Savagechatseries that uplifts people and celebrates the contributions of Black people to global culture. Contributions of Black people to global culture. We're so excited to have him here. He's going to be talking about podcasting. So if you're interested in learning about podcasting, this is definitely where you need to be. We're going to let Blair continue to tell you about him and his work. And for now, we're going to get started with our webinar. Thank you. Take it away, Blair.
Thank you, Michelle, and welcome everyone. I hope I can even closely, if I can even closely live up to that introduction of the how dynamic this presentation is supposed to be. I hope to share and impart on everyone just what I've learned in the journey that my husband and I have been on in the world of podcasting, digital talk, series production, hosting over the last 3 or so years since we dove headfirst into the podcasting world in the middle of the pandemic. So as Michelle said, and thank you, Michelle, for that introduction, my name is Blair Dottin-Haley. I'm a native of New Orleans, Louisiana, graduated from St. Augustine High School and also Xavier University. I then, as Michelle noted, started the Blairism's brand back in 2016 with my husband, Brandon. And in 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, realized there's actually a story, and a quick story to how we got into podcasting. So in, I would say likely 2017, 18, my husband started to press me, I would say, push me for us to do some type of online digital Facebook Live or Instagram Live, some kind of show. And so I, at the time, did not think that it was time for us to be doing any kind of talk show or podcast.
Come on, sis.
One of the reasons I thought if we could get everyone to go on mute, please. One of the reasons that I was reluctant for us to start doing some kind of show was because, and this is, I would say, one of the most important components of podcasting, And honestly, one of the most important components in life, when you embark upon something, you have to be consistent. You have to be consistent in terms of not only your investment into whatever that thing is that you are trying to bring to fruition, in that, in this case, a podcast, but you have to also be consistent in order for other people to take it seriously. And if you want to get your podcast uh, into people's, regular rotation, into people's iPhones and Android phones and on their Spotify lists and their Apple playlists, you're going to have to create content consistently. And so the reason why at that time I did not want to start a podcast or to start any kind of talk series was because I did not think that our schedules at the time permitted the kind of consistency that I knew we would need to both give to it in terms of the energy and production, but also in order for it to be received in a way that was taken seriously in the world, right? Even if you are creating a podcast about about a topic that is not serious or is about foolishness, if you want to be taken seriously about your podcast, whether it's about something serious or not, you have to be consistent. So that's the kind of how we got into it, because once you fast forward, 2 years and we're in a pandemic, and I realized it was then a much better and more opportune time for us to foray into the world of digital talk, into the world of podcasting, in order because we had so much space and opportunity. There were so many people who were both at home sitting kind of, with we had a captive audience, so to speak. And so in 2020, in the 3 months or so into the pandemic, I said to him, I think now would be a great time for us to begin or test the water to see what a podcast or a digital talk series could be like. Because when we tried to do it in 2018, 2019, and we started doing it once a week on Sundays on Facebook Live. And after maybe 3 or 4 Sundays, our schedule began to interfere, where we started to have to tell people, oh, we won't be here next Sunday. We'll be here the following. Oh, then the next Sunday would come and something would come up and we'd have to cancel. And so after the second or third cancel, I said to him, this is why I did not think it was time. And I think we should hold off until there is a better time based on the type of show that we want to create, and that is how I'm going to start. And I have a PowerPoint deck that I'm going to kind of use and kind of talk through. I don't know how do I make this so everybody can see it? I don't see. Let's see if I can share my screen. Yep. Hold on. There we go. Let's see. So podcasting, we did a radio interview on WBOK this morning. Shout out to Kimba White Dupree, who I see on, and to Braylon, who had us on to talk about podcasting, to talk about this Tech Talk Thursday that we're having now. And one of the questions that was asked was, what is podcasting, right? Some people, the word has been thrown around, and or is especially in more recent years has become much more popular. And so people are, what is actual podcasting? And podcasting really is storytelling. It's really storytelling through an audio or audio visual medium that people can listen to repeatedly or multiple times if they so choose. And the great thing about technology is that podcasting, there is not one static way to put a podcast out into the world or to produce and develop a podcast. But before you even get into where you want to develop your podcast or how you want to develop your podcast or when or how often, you have to determine or decide what your story is. What is the purpose? What message are you trying to get out into the world? And so what is your story? What is your podcast? What is the content that you are planning to share with the world, with your audience? And so one best practice I would say around determining what your podcast is going to be about is think about how it is that you can both share a message, but also create value, right? Whether that's information value, education value, or entertainment value. How is what I'm putting out into the world adding value to the lives of those people who I intend to reach with this podcast? Those are the kinds of foundational questions that you have to ask yourself in the formulation of even the concept of what it is you are going to do before you start talking about what kind of microphone or platform or guests you want to have on. What is your intention in putting this out into the world? For us, at a time so a couple things. One, our brand, the Blairisms, is centered around both inspiration, reflection, joy, laughter, but also celebration of Blackness, Black people, and outfitting the resistance, and also lending our voices and efforts to activist causes. And so for us, in a time in 2020 where the country was in such a state of unrest and chaos in a lot of ways after the murder of George Floyd, that the intersection of our brand, what our brand was already, and the timing in the pandemic that made it feasible for us to develop a show where we were able to interview people who were at home, but who had contributed tremendously to Black culture. All of those pieces came together to create a situation where the podcast kind of told us what it was supposed to be about, or what it should be about, or what it needed to be about. And so us producing a podcast centered around Black joy and Black contributions to the world in a time where Black lives, there was a question, and as we all know, has been a question about the value of Black lives. And so what each of you has to do is find for yourself what your story is and what it is that you want to share with the world and why. And really sit with that to answer, and really answering that question will help you to answer all of the other questions that you have around developing your podcast. When you're going to produce it, meaning, is this going to be a weekly podcast? Is it going to be a daily podcast? Is it going to be a monthly podcast? How often does your audience need this information? And another way to ask that question, how much time do I need to get all of this information out to my audience? How much information is there in this story that I am planning to tell through this podcast that how long is it going to take me to get it out? And in doing that, decide what the most digestible pieces are for both the audience and for you as the producer or host of the podcast. Michelle, I want to stop and ask if there are any questions while we're going.
Okay, I was about to put that also in the chat box. So anyone, if there are any questions, you can either drop them in the chat box or you can open your mic up quickly and ask your question.
Oh, I see a question from Kelder. How do you measure success? So I think the best way to answer that question, and that answer is going to be different for everybody. And that answer, again, is going to be extrapolated from your intention on the front end. What is your goal in developing this podcast? Is it to build? Is it to grow your business? Is it to grow your position, your own public persona? Is it to share information? Is it to develop? Is it to grow a community? What is your mission? What is your goal at the outset? So our goal at the outset was to create a space to celebrate Black culture and to, in the time that we had, sit down with as many what we call savages, which is why we called it the Savage Chat series, savages of Black culture that we could. Well, in a year and a half's time, we sat down with over 400 people who have contributed tremendously to Black culture. I consider that a success. Not now. We were fortunate and blessed to win awards for our show, for the production of the show, for the hosting of the show, for one of our most notable episodes. We've won awards for that episode. But the way that I measure the actual success of our show is we set out to sit down with the best and brightest and all of those who have contributed to Black culture. And we got some of the best and brightest to share with our audience and with our community, conversations with some of the most incredible people in Black culture: Vanessa Williams, Erica Alexander, T.C. Carson. I mean, Royce Duplessis, state senator, folks from New Orleans, folks from around the country. And so for me, success was, oh my goodness, we're going to get to sit down with this person next. Oh my goodness, we're going to get to sit down with this person next. Because for me, sharing the stories of all of the folks who had contributed was my metric at the front end. And so that's how I continue to measure success going forward. It's going to be different for everybody. My husband would likely say that monetization was his goal at the front end, and he would measure success because we have been able to turn the work that we did into streams of revenue. And so there are, again, different ways to measure success, different measures of what is successful and what makes a podcast successful, but only really, truly, only you know what the measures are that make you know that what you have done, it has been successful and has met the mark that you were setting out at the beginning. I hope that helped. I hope that helped. All right. So once you know or have decided what it is, what's your raison d'etre? What's your reason for doing the podcast? Why? What story are you trying to tell? Who are you trying to reach? And what are you trying to put out into the world? You have to then decide, pick a name, decide on your name. What is the name of it? Again, this is a journey that you're on in creation and in production. And none of these things are in a vacuum. None of these things are isolated. And so all of them inform the next and the other. And so think of this as a journey that you're on in creation, where you're going step by step, and some of the steps happen simultaneously, some lead to the other, but they're all connected. That from the moment that you decide you want to do a podcast, to the moment you click record, to the moment you click upload, to the moment that you're receiving feedback, from the moment that you are booking guests, if you want to have guests, all of these things are connected and go back to what is your original intent and what are you trying to put out into the world by creating a podcast, because ultimately that's what a podcast is. You are deciding to put something out into the world for other people to consume. So you choose your topic, you decide your format. Again, what you decide your podcast is going to be about will inform, is this a podcast that you host alone? Is this something that is just you talking? Is this something where you're going to have guests? Is this a podcast that you produce and have somebody else host, right? Just because you have a great idea and can produce a podcast does not necessarily mean you might need to be hosting a podcast. Are you the right person to host the podcast that you want to produce? It may be. Some people produce podcasts that they don't host. They get other people to host because, for whatever reason, based on the person's connection to the topic area, or based on the person's ability to host. Hosting, if you're doing a podcast that includes a hosting component, meaning you're going to have guests on and holding conversations or roundtable discussions, there are skill sets that certain people have, and not that you can't develop or hone those skill sets, but there are certain skill sets that are more necessary based on your format. And so pick your name, describing your format, describing your podcast, deciding your format. So, as I mentioned earlier, technology now allows for podcasts to be created in so many different ways that when podcasting first started weren't available, right? At the advent of podcasting, you picture, this big microphone and in a studio and headphones and now, I mean, people are shooting entire movies on iPhones now. And similarly, there is the possibility, you have the resources just with our phones now to do so much creation. There's so many apps for creating music now, GarageBand. There's so many apps that you can use to record, like iMovie. I mean, we created our entire podcast series using IG Live. We had never used Instagram Live before June of 2022. We went live one time, and after how well that was another thing. And this is the other thing too. Putting something out into the world, I think, should not be taken lightly. I don't think that you should take lightly the decision to put your name on something and start putting it out into the world. And so when we decided, there was a lot of what I would say divine timing and providence and instruction in the timing that we decided to step out into the world and put our podcast out. And I say that to say, before, maybe 2 weeks before we launched our show on Instagram Live, we went live on Instagram for the first time. And we had Instagram and Instagram Live for years and had never gone live from our brand's Instagram ever. And so when we launched the Savage collection, we I was on a phone call, and at the end of that phone call, decided to do a Instagram Live launch party for this particular collection. We did the launch party with a guest, so it was almost kind of like what would have been like one of our shows. So it was almost like we were, I guess what I'm saying is, we were doing a proof of concept and didn't realize it. And there are some times that things will happen in your life that you are not expecting, that will speak to you to create something that you had not ever anticipated. I say that to say I never anticipated being a podcaster. That was not something that I thought was going to be a part of my story or my journey, but we went live that time. And the next week, after, trying to do a show 2 or 3 years before, the next week, the spirit said to me, it's time to do this. Let's go and go forward and could just keep going. And so those are all things that I think inform how it is you step out into the world. What I was saying was, technology has allowed for so many different ways now to create content and to capture content to create a podcast, or that could be created and turned into a podcast. We took our Instagram Live videos. There are a number of different services, platforms that will allow you to take videos that you've created, conversations that you've captured on video, upload them in a way that extracts just the audio, and then you can upload them directly to the streaming podcast services like Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and there's a whole host of podcasting platforms that you can use to upload your content and share with your audience. You definitely want to consider your audience. I think that might be other than your own intentions. And I know I'm talking and not necessarily going through the PowerPoint. I really created this PowerPoint. Listen, if you're a podcaster, you're a talker. I'm a talker, not a writer. I really wanted to have this PowerPoint deck so that there was something written other than your notes, if you're taking notes, that you can take, that people could take with them from this. So I'm not necessarily following or going through this, and I hope that's okay. I hope people are able to follow along with how I'm approaching this. So what I was going to say is that even as important as your intention in putting the podcast out into the world, you have to consider who are the people you are targeting, and do they want to hear what it is that you have to share? What is it that is going to be, what is compelling for them, for the people that you are planning to reach with your message, with your story, with your interview series, with your whatever it is, with whatever podcast type you choose, whether it's whether it's fiction based, whether it's interviews, whether it's you sharing your thoughts on football, or whatever it is your podcast is about. Who are your people? Where's your audience? And what is it that will be interesting to them? What will be compelling to them? What will make them want to listen? What will make them want to share that they're listening? What will make them want to tell other people? And if you are doing a podcast or show that is going to involve guests, it's important that you are clear not only about your intention and about your show, but you also have to, because you have to get other people to be bought into it to participate, right? You have to get other people to be willing to take their time, if you're going to have guests, to not only take the time out of their schedules to do the recording, to do the podcast themselves, but also attach themselves to your brand. one of the things I realized in doing the Savage Chat series is you're not only, and I mean, I think for us, because we had an apparel brand connected to the show that were kind of bound together, it was a little bit different, but also know that when you're inviting people to your podcast, to your show, you are asking them in some ways to attach themselves, even if it's for a moment, even if it's for an episode, to your brand, and vice versa, right? And so in your, in your casting of your guests and who it is that you want to share with your audience, you have to also be mindful of your brand in who it is that you attach and invite, and making sure that they are in sync and in line, going back to the intention and the mission that you started out with at the beginning. I'm going to stop to see if there's any other questions. Any questions before we're about halfway at the halfway mark. And as y'all can see, I can talk.
There are no questions, and I'm sorry.
I have a question. Blair, hey.
Hey, Auntie.
I have a statement. You're probably going to be tripping out. Okay. You've been first of all, I want to commend you on all your success.
I appreciate
Every time I want to call you, you are gone. I'm like, he's gone again. And this is what I wanted to call you about. I have a podcast.
Okay.
I have 2 other partners. And it's been on my heart and mind to call you to ask you for help because I'm stuck at 9. Let the world know. We've been recording every week for about 1.5 years. I did not tell you yet, and I'm gonna tell you why. Because of our topic and our description. So okay. I wanted people, so you've been on my heart and mind to call, and I wanted people to learn about us organically. And then when I saw you market this podcast on Facebook, I said, there it is. There it is, so it lined up perfectly. That's how spirit works. And so, yes, I'm so glad that you're having this because I need your help.
Yeah, well, let me just say what I would say, and without knowing all of the details, right? The let the world know part. You cannot be bashful about it, right? You have to treat it like it's a big deal and like it is a thing from the very beginning. Now, I will say this. One of the things that was because we already had a brand and a social media following, that did help when we released when we started the podcast, because we already had somewhat of a social media following, right? One of the other things though that happened is because of the way that social media works, and because we were doing a show and engaging guests that had even larger social media followings than us, our social media following grew just because of the format that we chose to do the show. We got instant audience from our guests because their audience is automatically alerted because they're on our show, because of the platform that we chose, right? And so these are, again, thinking about what you're trying to accomplish. Are you trying to grow an audience of how many people are you trying to reach? That is another question to answer in thinking about what is the format that I'm putting it out in the world, and how am I advertising it, and am I bashful about advertising it, and all of those things, right? Does that help? I mean,
that does help.
Yes, okay, that does help, and we'll talk offline about the specifics. You know how to reach me. My number is not going to change.
Yeah, you just got to I got to catch you when you steal.
Well, listen, just ring the phone because I'm not going to ever be still. So just call. All right.
Okay.
Proof of concept, and in what ways were you able to monetize? Okay, proof of concept. What I mean by proof of concept is I have an idea that I think other people are going to attach to, be fed by, enjoy, want to connect to. But that's in my head. How do I prove that concept has legs in whatever arena we are talking about, right? So when we launched our clothing brand, for our proof of concept plan, when we launched our clothing brand, we did a 10-day pre-sale where we launched 6 designs online and had people buy for 10 days. We told them the website would be open for 10 days. We set a number ourselves that if we hit this number of sales in this 10 days, we have proven the concept. And that means now we're going to take this and really put legs under it to make it a real thing in the world. And so proof of concept is going to be different for different people based on what you're trying to accomplish. But for a podcaster, what I would say to prove your concept is really, how do you measure or find out whether or not what it is that you have in your head is valuable to the people that you think it will be? Now, for a podcaster, that might be a focus group. That might be thinking about who your audience is, getting 10 to 15 or 20 of them separately together, however you decide, and workshopping what your concept is with those people and getting their feedback. Go to where you are intending to get your message and ask people who are in your potential audience, is this valuable? Is this something you would listen to? Is this something you want to hear? How could I make it more valuable to you? How could I make it more interesting? So those are all the kinds of ways that you develop what your proof of concept is. And so that it really at the heart of it is this idea that I have in my head, does it really work in the world, right? Is it something that other people who I intend to have listened to this podcast, is this something that they want to listen to or hear? I hope that helps, Malika. And in what ways? Okay, and so let me just, for the monetization part of this, right? We were able to monetize our podcast in 2 different ways, and I'll describe it like this. I'll describe it as direct monetization and indirect monetization. The direct monetization, we secured very small, but we were able to secure sponsorships, product sponsorships that from a few different product companies that wanted us, or that had us either position their product in the frame of our show, in the background of our show, or take a drink on camera and announce it, send a product to guests. So there are different ways that we were able to get sponsorship, and some of those sponsorships came with products, and some of them came with, here is a check for you mentioning our product this many times on this many days of your show. So that's direct monetization. You can connect and find ways to find sponsors to sponsor your show directly, either to share their products or their ideas or their business. And that's usually it's like folks buying advertising or buying commercial space in your podcast space. What I would say is an indirect way to monetize, and this comes as people are learning based on you putting your whatever it is, what you put out into the world, people are learning more about you, your capabilities, your quality, people learn more about you when you do a podcast. I mean, there's no way that you can start doing a podcast, especially if you are both producing it and hosting it, that people are not going to just learn more about who it is that you are, what it is you're doing in the world, who, what you're capable of. And so one of the other ways that we were able to monetize is by partnerships with other organizations, companies, institutions that saw our work and wanted us to help them in some project, on some kind of different project. And so I'm now producing podcasts or helping to consult other companies and organizations who are doing live podcast series or virtual podcast series. And so that's another way that you can monetize the work that you have put in on your podcast, is by having other people put you to work for them in helping to create their podcast. I'm now, for example, hosting and producing and co-producing the Delgado Tech Collab podcast that can be found on Delgado's YouTube page. And so that is another way that you can, that monetization can, hold on, I'm trying to find the box. That's another way that monetization is possible for your podcast. I'm trying to find. Bay is my audio-visual. Bay is the audio-visual of the two of us, and he is not here with me. And so I appreciate everybody bearing with me. That's the other thing to know. The other thing to know about podcasting: get a team in place and have everybody who is on the team to play to their strengths. I am not audio, visual, tech savvy. I mean, I'm not terrible, but I've also been trying to find the chat box for the last 30 to 45 seconds. Get people on your team based on how your podcast is going to be developed to do the components that you need to do for you. For example, I'm down at number 5 now. I'm going to go to number 5 on podcast about your artwork and your music. That's the other thing I recognized as we were doing a podcast that included guests. Just having a very talented graphic artist, graphic designer create the flyers that the guests were then going to use was a game changer, because the flyer itself was so lit, the guests were excited to post it on their wall, excited to share it, excited to get it. And so, choosing artwork and design and all of those aesthetics that are complementary to the narrative that your story or your podcast is going to be about. Of course, they need to be in alignment, is also something important to think about as you are preparing to share your podcast with the world, right? Because, one of the other things to do is you should do some period, even if it's not long. I mean, we only marketed our podcast for a week before we launched. That's only because I came up with the idea a week and a half before we launched. And then, we decided to do it a week and a half before we launched, and then we launched. But there should be some period of informing, even if you start with your social media audience, your family, your friends, letting people know that you are doing a podcast. And so sharing and telling people that you are going to be doing a podcast, getting an engaging and appropriate design, music, all of the things. So I'll give you a good example. What we did, one of the things that we did for guest engagement with music, the intersection of music and engaging our guests, is instead of us picking a song or having a theme song, we would ask each of our guests, since our show is called the Savage Chat Series, we would ask each of our guests to send us a list of songs that they considered savage, a list of songs that they considered classy, a list of songs that they considered bougie, and a list of songs that they considered ratchet. And we would pick a song from that list, and as they came on to our podcast, we would play a little bit of one of those songs and then ask them about that song. And so, you know, there are different kinds of ways. There are different ways to both answer some of these questions, but do it in a way that answers other questions or creates other space for conversation and creates different ways to engage both of your audience. Copyright issues. So what we realized was we could only play about 10 seconds of the song. So we did at very early, that's a very good question. I was gonna say that when you use, if you're gonna be on Instagram, or if you are gonna be on Instagram we got to a place where we were playing literally 2 lines of the song, enough for them to hear it, and then we could talk about it. Because when we first started and we would play the song and we was jamming to it, Instagram was like, no, that ain't gonna work. So thank you for that question. Make sure you only play a snippet. If you're gonna do something like that or use other music, play a snippet. Otherwise, you can create music or get music created for you to use as your theme music for your show. I hope that's helpful. We have about 10 minutes left. I want to make sure I answer any questions that anybody else has about anything that I've said so far. Because, you know, ultimately, podcasting is really less, I mean, the process of putting it out into the world, I don't want to diminish what is involved in the actual production and securing guests and doing all of those things. But if you've answered all of the important questions on the front end about your intention in the world and getting the resources in place that you need in order to execute, and you decide on a consistency, then I would say go for it. Question, yes.
I have a question. At what point or how many followers and subscribers did you have before you began to get requests that led to monetization?
Ooh. I would say maybe 15,000 on Instagram. And here's what I would say. I think, because I know that there is this thing around follower count and influence, right? There's a correlation that people make between, or that is made between follower count and influence, and follower count and ability to monetize, because follower count is associated with influence. One of the things I'd say is, while we still are not in the follower number kind of stratosphere that people typically are in to have sponsorships or partnerships or monetization, I think it's important to not just focus on how many people are following you as much as who is following you, and how engaged those people who are following you are. One of the things that I know we were able to transition into partnership monetization was because people recognized that the people who are following us are ride or die following us, and they are very engaged following us, and they are, for some of the organizations that we're working with, a very specific target audience. And so I do know that that is a thing that in this monetization world is a thing, right? Numbers that lead to, or that will lead to the appearance of influence for following, for monetization and sponsorship. But I don't think that that's the only path. And I think that there are ways to create, to demonstrate value add that does not connect itself necessarily to this is how many people are following you on Instagram or on social media. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
No problem. Thank you for the question. Anybody else? 7 minutes. Any other questions? And thank you everybody who joined. Thank you so much. I gotta be honest with you all. I told the folks who I work with here about this that I hope that people found this to be valuable. So I really hope that the rambling that I have done this afternoon has added some value to your journeys as you are considering or have already embarked on a podcasting storytelling journey. I really hope so.
Well, if there's anyone else, if you have any questions, please, this is a great time. There are some thank yous coming in, and
Thank you.
we do thank you so much, Blair, for everything
you
that
all
you're
are
doing.
very
So we do have a little bit more time, about 6 minutes left. So if anybody else, if you have any questions, do you mentor? That's the next question that came up.
Mentor is a very interesting word. I would say yes, to answer that question. Yes, I do mentor.
Okay.
Yes.
There's another question here that says, this goes back to when you started out. I'm sorry.
With the Blair's brand sharing. How do I go about
Yeah.
choosing a company to produce your brand? Say more about the company, choosing a company to produce your brand. Say more about, can you turn your mic on and let's talk?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So, because I've been following you for quite some time now, and you pretty much was my inspiration in regards to inspiring people on Facebook. So I had started out, I do a lot of inspirations online, and I do a lot of call it the tea of the day, where I see a lot of inspiration. So the issue that I'm having is trying to find the right company that will produce my products, like the t-shirts, to start out there.
Yeah. Listen, let me just tell everybody this at once. There are because we are now in, this is again because of technology, all of our production is print on demand, which we use print on demand companies, which will allow you to create designs, put them up on a website. You pay a fee for them to produce them, but you don't have to, when we first started, we were printing them locally. We did that one time for our proof of concept. That proof of concept order was us literally packaging t-shirts in our living room, putting them in bags, in the mail bags, writing them on the envelope. And we realized we had a good problem that our business, it even started out with too much for us to be able to do that. And so because my husband has a background in business development, he immediately went into finding the mechanisms for us to not have to do that part of the production ourselves, so we could focus on coming up with the inspiration, right? You don't need to be worried about printing the shirt because you need to be worried about the inspiration. So there's a company called Printify, 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 that we use. They are print on demand company. You can use them through Shopify. We use Shopify as our online vendor machine, our vendor for processing, and those Shopify connects with different print-on-demand companies like Printify, like Printful. There are a number of different print-on-demand companies that connect to Shopify. You create the website and you post, and then people place their orders and they print them, they produce them, and they come straight to you. They come straight to your client, the customer. So I would say Printify would be Printify and Shopify are good places for you to start if you want to produce t-shirts for your brand.
Thank you so very much. That was helpful.
You are so welcome. So welcome. And thank you for following, and thank you for all the love.
You're welcome.
I think the slides will be emailed out.
We definitely will do that. Thank you so much. We're going to wrap up by telling everyone thank you for being a part of Tech Talk Thursday. This has been excellent. Looking forward to the next one. Also, we do encourage everyone to go to the Delgado Workforce IT website, learn about the tech certification courses and all of our upcoming events. We will be having Blair on the Tech Collab podcast. That's his podcast here in Delgado. He's going to be interviewing some of the local celebrities, as well as just people who are within innovation and who are helping to build out the community, to build up the community. And so we do thank you all for being a part of this event. Thank you, Blair, for sharing with us.
Thank you all so much. I appreciate it. Thanks for the invitation. Thank you all for joining. Again, I hope it was helpful, and I hope I can't wait to hear all your podcasts. How about that?
Thank you.
Excellent.
I'll be calling you.
Ring me. See y'all later. Bye.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
I have another one, huh?